for joining us tonight. I'm Sarah. I'm the Executive Director at Rivers Edge, and tonight is all about saying thank you. Thank you for joining us for our first ever sold out online event.
Hey!
I know, so exciting. 20 months ago, we made the hard decision to close our physical doors temporarily and to open our virtual hearts. And tonight is a celebration of you for sticking with us over the past 2 years. Thank you so much for your participation, for all of your words of encouragement, for all of your donations to help us stay up and running. You have been such a strong community, and we are so grateful that you have kept Rivers Edge Mission alive. And most of all, I want to say thank you to Jan for making tonight possible as a gift to the Rivers Edge community. So with that, I want to introduce Jan Phillips, the Woman of the Hour. Jan has been a retreat director and a speaker with us for many years. She has taught in the US and Canada. She has 11 award-winning books and is just releasing her new book, Still on Fire, Field Notes from a Queer Mystic, where she talks all about her journey from wounded religion to healing spirituality. And so we are so excited to hear about her new memoir as she launches her book tour. So welcome, Jan.
We're happy to be here today. And it always makes me happy when I can give myself away to some place that's given so much to me. And Rivers Edge is one such place. You know, I used to be a sister of St. Joseph. And so Josephite's I'm still one, right? You can't not be one once you're there. I said to a friend of mine the other day, when I used to be Catholic, she goes, Jan, you can't not be Catholic. You're always going to be Catholic. So I'm facing it. I'm cellularly a Catholic. So the promise for today is that I'm going to move you forward. And I don't know, it's going to be different for every one of you, but I'll probably challenge some of you. Tony DeMello used to say, the best thing a friend can do for you is to question your own thoughts, right? Which never feels good, you know, when somebody says, well, I don't know about that, but you're all muted, so I get to talk. And I'm hoping that this becomes as much a dialogue. I know everybody's very reticent whenever we start these things, but I'm going to ask some questions by the end so we can engage and see what's taking place. Because, you know, I just came off, because this book is out and they hired a publicist, and so now there's about 25 podcast interviews lined up for the next week. And I just got off one of those calls and we were talking about the Exodus movement away from the churches. And, you know, I never officially left the church. The church officially kicked me out by saying, we're not giving you absolution if you don't promise to stop being gay. And so, you know, that couldn't work for me because nobody can promise to stop being gay. So I was refused absolution, and that was in 1969 or 70, 1970. And so I just basically had to become my own priest. I became a priest of the imagination and considered the universe, the earth itself, to be my altar. Because I know we're not all Catholic here, but probably you've all been exposed to some kind of Catholic thing. I mean, you do see when the Pope goes around the country. And there's just a great deal of ritual and reverence for that which is, I don't know, feels esoteric or outside of the realm of the secular. What does that mean? What means you feel it? It means you feel deeply something that's mysterious and intangible, and whatever your notion of God is now, it's probably a long way away from what you learned about God as an 8-year-old. So, you know, we abandon those things that were presented to us, like the Tooth Fairy and Santa Claus and, you know, the Easter Bunny, right? And so the idea of God as a male character on a cloud, like what you see in the Sistine Chapel, you know, Adam and God doing that. It's like, oh man, it's time to update that image. I think they should cover it with mirrors. So if you're looking for God, you look up and there you are, because I think we are the visible particle version of the wave of God, which is invisible. So when I think of, I say my prayers in the morning, I light my candle, I stare into the candle. I have to reimagine God every morning because it's so in the air that God is afar and God is a guy. God is all these things that the culture keeps perpetuating. So every morning I reimagine that force as a vivid and vitalizing force that's the air that I'm breathing and the air in my lungs. It's the oxygen in my blood. It's all what I am made of. I'm made of the energy of that thing, of that great mystery. So I promised today that we would talk about the distinction between religion and faith, because I never knew there was such a thing. And now I don't know if everybody knows there is or not, but I'm just going to tell the brief story of how, because it really awakened me in a whole new way. 1967, I entered the convent. So we have our first theology class, September, in this, it's a Lithuanian priest, Father Grobis. He walks into the room, big burly guy, walks into the room and he goes, all right, we're all postulants. We all dressed alike, looked the same, sat in our rows, perfect, good little students. He goes, somebody stand up and tell me about this relationship of yours with this God that you're going to soon be marrying. And it was kind of an obtuse question. It was pretty silent in the room for a while. And then one sister raises her hand and she recites something right out of the Baltimore Catechism, which is where we all learned everything we know about God. So she says something like, God the Father is the first person of the Holy Trinity, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, that's right, because we all had memorized the same book. And he looked at her and he said, that's it? She said, yes, Father. He goes, sit down. Then someone else raises her hand. And she tries, God made us to show his goodness and to share his everlasting life and have, I mean, these were terrible. And he did the same to her. That's the best you got? Yes, Father. Sit down. And now I have my first anxiety attack. And this little tear comes out of my eye. I hate this priest. I'm miserable. I don't know what he's doing. Why would he embarrass us like this? And then he begins to go on about how ashamed we should be of ourselves. That we never Don't we have an original thought? Can't we say something personal about our own faith? How come we're just reciting memorized stuff, saying what other people have said to us? What about how we personally and uniquely feel? And nobody was able to respond to that because as Catholics, we had been taught what to think, but never how to think. So we didn't know how to have an original thought and how to formulate sentences that reflected anything in that category of the great spiritual mysteries. We're 18 years old. So he went on to talk about the differences between faith and religion. And he said, religion is something that we inherit. It's handed down to us. It's a discrete body of information, of dogma and doctrine that you inherit and that you can put right now on that shelf because we're not going to revisit it for this whole semester. Because this is about creating our own faith. And your own faith, he says, is not inherited. It's something that you create for yourself based on your ultimate commitments. Now, he's reading Paul Tillich, right? None of us knew what he was talking about. Ultimate commitments was just a foreign idea to me. And I was a bright postulant, but he just talked way over our head. So it took him the whole semester to get us to tease apart religion from spirituality, to identify what our own personal ultimate commitments were. And I never did like that priest till the very end because I just had to labor so hard to figure out what it was. But I went back to Jesus. I raised myself with this little book called My Daily Bread. And through that process had created what felt like a real personal and intimate relationship with Jesus, the man. I didn't care that much about the God part of Jesus. I just related to the man. So I stood up one day and I proclaimed that my ultimate commitments were to be a light in the world, to be a force for justice, and to be a peace activist, and that wherever I would be, there would be harmony and justice, and that I would make it a point to care for the marginalized and the poor and to fight for justice wherever I could, because that is what culminated in my mind as the teachings of my teacher, Jesus. So I proclaimed my faith that day, and it's a really good thing that I did because it's all I have. It's all I've done since 1969. And I think how we act in the world, I said in my book that my activism is my spirituality in running shoes. You know, it's like, what good is it to have a faith in you if nobody can tell what that faith is? And you have to express it. I remember when we started doing folk masses, remember the song, they will know you are Christians by your love, by your love. I never liked that song, but they know we're Christians by our love. And I think that is true. So I'm just going to take a little bit of time right now. I'm going to take 1 minute and have you all either write down or close your eyes or think about it. Just take 1 minute to come up with what you would consider your ultimate commitments. What is behind your spirituality? Because your spirituality is that thing that you're creating. So if you look at what you do in the world, the good works that you do in the world, somebody can connect the dots between how you are as a force for good and what it is you believe inside. That's the kind of integrity that we want to be living with, that causes us to feel like our lives are passionate and purposeful. So take a minute, write it down, or just think about it. I'll set my timer for a minute. And then I'm going to come back and ask some questions. So I'm going to look for someone I know here. And then I am going to, Carol Creek, are you alive and well? Does it make sense to you, the distinction between religion and faith?
Yes, that makes sense what you said, indeed.
What would you say your ultimate commitments are?
You know, as I bring my little tired mind here tonight, my ultimate commitment, I mean, is certainly to my relationships, to being, I just want to be able to choose love as a regular way of being,
Yeah.
to help bring peace. Through my spiritual direction practice, I definitely have an ultimate commitment of listening well and deeply so that others can really see and experience themselves and the God that they know. And to really commit to seeing the good and the sacred in the other. Some recent experiences in life are bringing me to a new awareness of injustice. And so growing within me now is a way that one day I will be able to be more active in some areas in bringing justice. You know, and then to be a commitment to bring compassion to my own self so that I'm part of this.
Good. Very good to include yourself in that.
Yeah, because, you know, sometimes we forget that.
I think it's evolutionary because all of our history, you know, for those of us over 50, the history was kind of, as a girl, I'm not talking to the men here. I see there's men on here, but as a girl, figure out how to serve everybody before yourself.
Oh, absolutely.
We even had these maxims in the convent. They were called maxims.
Yes.
We had to recite. Oh yeah, Carol, you were into. We had to recite them, and they were just awful. Like one of them would be about do everything to make something really great happen, And
Yes.
when it happens, give credit to somebody else for doing it. You know?
Yes. Oh my goodness, yes. Because if you get credit, you would suffer from the sin of pride.
The sin of pride.
And yet what we find, I think, is, as we begin to see our own power, we see how the Spirit moves through us. We experience that in silence. There, it only leads to humility, right? Absolute humility.
Right, because we have an invisible dance partner.
Yeah. Yes, but we're
Right?
usually not showing
Damn
up.
it, I don't have what it takes to see my partner, my
And we,
co-creative partner.
yeah, and we forget to show up because we're not bringing that love and care to our own self and our own stories. So I guess that's another ultimate commitment that maybe until I'm dead is to really be present. We always hear, be present in the present moment, be here. This is where God is. And, just last night I had a thought that I was with my 9-year-old granddaughter and I had bought a book about tumbleweeds, slow down. And it was about moving fast to get all of life. And then the tumbleweed got stuck and began to see the sunrise and see all these beautiful things in front, and realize that as we sit still, it comes to us. So I asked my 9-year-old granddaughter, Emma, to read that to me. And she just always shows up 100%. And she's a great reader. And she read with all expression this wonderful book. And afterwards, I wondered to myself, why is she, what do I feel with her and her presence? And then it came to me that as we show up to be present, that whole spiritual movement of present moment awareness, maybe it's then that we become a presence to others, and that spirit within begins to move through when we're fully present. Does that make sense?
I think that's totally true.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because that's what happens. There's something about her that's a little bit other. And I keep thinking, what is it? And I think it's because every moment she shows up in full presence. So that's my teacher.
I think that evolution is apparent to us now, and we can really see the distinction. Like if I am with people who are Gen Xers or Gen Zers or whatever, they have a different way of embracing life and synthesizing information that's kind of multidimensional.
Mm-hmm.
And their languaging and how they put things together, it challenges me.
Yes.
Because I'm 72 and I am not evolved in the same way they are.
Yes.
But we do have it in us to be fully present to people. This guy who was doing the radio interview today was talking about all, so in my memoir I talked about the whole reason I went into the convent was because I was suicidal when I was 12, because I was discovering that I was queer, and what terrible news that was. So I thought I'd just kill myself, and a nun saved my life. Sister Helen Charles saved my life by doing what she called positive. She called my mother and said, your daughter's in trouble. She's all dark and sad. We got to fix her. We'll try this thing. It's a new thing called positive reinforcement. So she did it. My mom was like, my mom's one of 14 kids, and she's not about picking out one kid and making all this affirmation and applause. So she didn't do it so well at home, but the nun did it in spades in school, focusing on all my good qualities and singling me out. You're such a good speller. You're so good playing capture the flag. I watch you on the playground. You're such an athlete. Oh, you're so smart, this and that. You ask the kids in my 6th grade class and they had it with her, but for me, it really worked. And so who started that grade being a sad little sick but caterpillar blossomed into a butterfly because of Sister Helen Charles. And that's why I decided to be a nun, because I thought, oh my God, they got some kind of superpower. They save kids' lives. I want to be one. I had to wait 6 years. But I went off to be one, never even understanding what going through a novitiate would be like. So of course, after 2 years, they kicked me out. But those 2 years were the beginning of me steeping myself in my spiritual teachers, who were Teilhard de Chardin, the mystic scientist, Thomas Merton, the mystic monk who was bringing the East to the West, going over to Thailand and trying to get to Japan, and becoming aware of how great it would be to bridge the two dualistic religions, Buddhism and Christianity. So he was attempting to do that when he died. And Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who showed up to me, he was killed for the part he played, the anti-Nazi theologian who got killed because he was against Hitler and so public about it. And so those were my three kind of spiritual or religious role models.
Mhm.
And it really affected my life in a big way. And being in the novitiate meant I had all that time to do spiritual reading and meditation and studying of all things religious, which suited me because I was like a little mystic. I had a really deep appreciation for the divine. And, you know, I heard the other day, not the other day, but somebody said, a mystic is somebody who has an unmediated relationship with divinity. And that kind of helped me get it concise. It just means you do not need a mediator. You do not need a priest, a rabbi, an imam. You need nobody in order to have your deep and magical and mysterious relationship with the source of everything, the source of you, and the force that animates you, the force that's inside you, the sacred mystery. So to me, you know, that happens in the first hour of my day when I light my candle and have my time. I sit there like a satellite dish to mind at large. You know, a lot of you on my mailing list already get every Sunday bulletins from Immortality.
Yes.
Which is called that because Emily Dickinson said, the only news I get is bulletins all day from Immortality. And I thought, what a marvelous way of saying it. Because I think of divinity as intelligence, supreme intelligence, the masculine side. The feminine side, I think of as love supreme. And they had a baby called the cosmos. And everything that's created has that supreme intelligence and that supreme love. And that when we're living in alignment and true to those two things, that we know bliss. We know bliss. And in the novitiate, I didn't know this at the time. I knew I was really, really happy there. Well, A, because I didn't pay attention to any rules that didn't apply. right? So I didn't work at being obedient. So it wasn't a difficult place for me to be. But they did structure our lives in such a way that I did learn the formula for bliss, because when I backed up to see how did they divide our days, it was pretty equal parts of prayer and service and work, community and solitude, right? Community, solitude, prayer, service. And I thought, whoa, that's the formula that makes me happy. Every day has a little solitude, some communal activity, some service, and some prayer. And I get to fashion my days and think about it in the morning and say, this is what I'm going to do for each part of those things. And then I get to feel happy and complete and fulfilled at the end of the day. Nobody knows for sure who said this. I always heard it as a Buddhist principle. But the expression is engage with joy in all the sorrows of the world. Engage with joy in all the sorrows of the world. So when you consider, our hearts are breaking open for many, many reasons. We could go crazy if we try to become a solution to all the devastating problems that we encounter in the course of a day, from CNN or from the newspaper or from NPR. We're well aware of every institution we know is in a state of disrepair. Most importantly, our mother planet. So when you think about creating your life, creating your faith, you look at what are you committed to, and where are you going to apply that energy, right? You're committed to justice, say, or you're committed to the environment, or puppies, or the whales, right? So then we get to figure out, we're sad, those are the sorrows of the world. Engage with joy. How do we put those pieces together? So we ask ourselves, well, what do we love to do? What do I love to do? I love to write. I love to talk. I like to have a microphone in my hand. I like to photograph. So I take all these things that I like. And when I decided to make that peace pilgrimage around the world, what was going on in the world, it was 1983, Ronald Reagan, thank you very much, was proliferating so many nuclear weapons that you would hear reports of, now the stockpile is so big, we could blow up the earth 700 times. But the Russians could blow it up 800 times. So we need more. It was that kind of frenzy. So the sorrow of the world to me had to do with nuclear war, nuclear weapons. And so I read The 100th Monkey one day, and that book allowed me to imagine that I could be that kind of force for change. I'm not going to tell that story here. It's a short story, 100th Monkey. But anyway, I read it on my lunch hour, and it opened my eyes, and I thought, oh my God, I could be the 100th person. It really has to do with communicating a better way and being the force behind evolutionary breakthroughs in the minds of other people through communicating, not necessarily with words, but through our intentions, our actions, our love, our energy. So I said, oh, okay. Then I had 2 slideshows of the peace movement and the women's movement. And I said, I'm going to go around the world and talk to people about creating peace. Not like, I'm not going to talk about, you know, how many Pershing missiles, how many cruise missiles we have. I'm not a teacher. I'm an instigator of conversations of consequence. So I'm going to have us sit in small circles and talk about what can we do to cause peace in our little area. And so I picked up a few jobs. I worked for a year and a half, saved up $5,000. And then went around the room and I started around the world, but I started in Japan, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and shared my slideshows of the peace movement with 80 survivors from the Nagasaki bombing. So the answer for me was, what do I do about nuclear proliferation? Well, address it. How do I address it? With your photographs. You like to travel, go travel. Didn't take much to save up my $5,000. And it lasted me for a year. And that led to my first book, which is called Making Peace, One Woman's Journey Around the World. So I think it's good to identify what is it that causes your heart to break open. You know, my Living Kindness Foundation exists in the world today because my heart was broken open by these kids in Nigeria that didn't have a teacher. So I had to figure out what can I do? Me and a Dominican sister from Kansas who's lived in Nigeria for 30 years, figured out, right? So now there's a Living Kindness Learning Center over there with 2 apartments for 2 teachers. So there's always a relationship between our heart's break and our heart's delight, because your heart's delight wants to be married to your heart's break. That's where we get our ideas from, I think, when we get close to our pain. So I'm going to ask somebody else to unmute. I'm going to ask Deborah in Ohio to unmute yourself. Or if you want to pass the baton, you can pass it to Effie, because I see she's right above you. But are you willing to have a little conversation?
Sure.
Okay. So maybe we, instead of projecting outward, you look backward a little bit and see if in your history, there's a relationship between what broke your heart, what you love to do, and what you caused to happen in the world. This is your spirituality. How did it get activated so that you became a force and caused something in the world?
I think that my spiritual values guided my career choice of social work. And I think that they also guided my growing need for self-expression. Both guided my spiritual values and my growing need for self-expression, guided my path of my lay ministry. So.
And now you preach from a pulpit in a Unitarian church, right?
I do.
Okay, so creative expression, preaching from the pulpit, choose social work. That's what I chose after they kicked me out of the convent, because I'm thinking, what's the closest thing to none? It was
Right.
a social worker, because we want to do good. We want to work with the poor. We want to be next to the marginalized. We
Yes.
want to cause there to be justice. And we did that, right? And that was our faith in action. And I suspect that every one of you could look at your own life and see how that has happened, or look ahead and say, oh man, I think I know what's next for me now. What's next for me now? You know, what's next for me now, because once the project in Nigeria was finished, we built the building. I got grants from the Sisters of Charity in Dubuque. I raised money for solar power, 30 computers. It's all outfitted. There's 2 teachers there. So now I still have the foundation. So I say, what's the biggest crisis? What's the biggest social problem in the United States? And so for me, it's racism. So then I asked, well, what can I do doing something I love in my own, in a radius of 25 miles? And so to deal with racism. So I call up my Black poet friend and say, she does poetry in the schools. I say, let's have a Zoom meeting. You want to powwow about a creative enterprise? We get kids involved with writing, and Living Kindness will publish a booklet. They can be published authors in their teens. And we'll be mentors, and we'll get some mentors together for them. Okay, good. So now it's on my calendar next Thursday, Zoom with Johnny Renee. So that's kind of how it happens when you look to see next steps. Now, I can see from just looking at a few of you that some of us are in our 80s and we're not really thinking of next steps because we're tired and we've taken most of our steps. But there's always this that occurs. How do we show up and be fully present? The kind of presence that Carol was talking about with her granddaughter. That's the contributions that we make when we're out of the workforce. I'm still in the workforce now, but some of us are not. So what matters is, how are we in relationship? How does our faith show up in the love? Are we willing to be courageous and to bring up controversial subjects? Have we figured out how to have a conversation with our brother who thinks Donald Trump is the greatest thing since Velcro? Right? That's our spiritual task, to figure out these simple conundrums that we're having in the lives that we're living. So I'm never going to go around the world again. You know, we have done, a lot of us have done major work already. But still, we wake up in the morning, we're still infused with spirit, and spirit will move us forward to express itself in the world. Who was it? Catherine of Siena or Teresa of Avila said, Jesus has no hands but mine. He's got no ears but mine, no eyes but mine. Everything Jesus wants to do is possible in the world through me. And so that's kind of it. And it doesn't matter the nature, the length, the breadth of our trajectory. It just matters in the presence that how we contain that divine presence and how we share that with others in the world. I think that's like the quintessential thing that's up for us. So I'm going to I don't have the chat room out here, but Has anybody got any questions? Let me put up the chat room. Hold on. I'm Jewish and it's all the same patriarchy. Yeah, it's all the same patriarchy. Right. So let's just see if we got some questions floating around in the room, because it wants to be live. It doesn't want to just be me talking. So Sarah, are you moderating this? Can you see if anybody, maybe somebody should just raise your hand if you raise your hand in real life, although there's 3 screens here. Or put your
I can
name.
help too.
Okay, help us. Let's just see if there's some questions. I'd like to respond to something living. Effie, unmute yourself.
Hey, hi, Jan.
Hi, Eff.
Hey, you know, your bulletin came through today, your newsletter came through today, and it's talking about your new book and your gatherings on Zoom regarding your book club for that. Can you talk a little bit about that and share what you're doing with that?
Yeah.
Thank
So,
you.
I decided to have a virtual book club. At first it was going to be in the webinar category, so I would only have people in who, you know, paid $25 and were really serious about it, and the numbers would be smaller. But then I decided, no, just make it a free meeting. And it would give us an opportunity because the subtitle is Field Notes from a Queer Mystic. So what I'm trying to do is help people figure out have a sense of feeling for what it's like to grow up in a marginalized, in a homophobic culture. Because all of us by now, if you're any kind of compassionate person, somebody has come out to you, right? You got, you know, if you make it safe for people, they will tell you the truth about themselves. And so it's kind of incumbent upon every one of us who's committed to deeper relationship to really know how to be present to people who have survived the travesties that happen as one lives out a gay life in this culture. So it was important for me to have queer be in the subtitle. And the mystic part is because, you know, half the people on this call are mystics. You wouldn't think to call yourself that, because mystic has been defined for us as some highfalutin thing where, you know, from the Middle Ages, where, you know, women weep and wail in their cell, and that was that. You read Catherine of Siena or Teresa, or I don't know, Hildegard is pretty much a genius, but some of their writings are just wacky, right? So the whole idea of mysticism, I think, needs to be contemporized and brought up to date by those of us who are proclaiming my relationship with divinity is an everyday affair. I'm in love with this thing. Every day we're together. Every day we celebrate in gratitude the existence of each other, right? It's a love affair. So that's why I put the word mystic there. You know, when I first read Andrew Harvey and met him, and he, you know, the word mystic is in his book title too, and I thought it was a little haughty, but you know, that was 20 years ago. And I'm sure people will think I'm haughty and arrogant. Who cares? Because what people think of me is not my business. But I'm thinking that it's a controversial book because it really relocates God from the heavens to the earth. And Teilhard de Chardin, he said, in the 1940s, he said, the religion of the heavens is giving way to the religion of the earth. He predicted that. He, you know, he used this Jesuit brainiac patriarchal words for it. But basically, what he said is the old religion of the heavens is changing, and we're about to celebrate a religion of the earth. And that's our job. If any of you preach, if any of you are in spiritual groups, if any of you try to talk about, have a blog, write about spiritual things, then it helps to expose yourself to how did she do it? How did she do it? And so this book is an example of how did it happen that a Catholic kid gets kicked out of the Catholic Church, yet and does all the wrong things, and yet still becomes a mystic. And what does she make of it? She's a social justice advocate. You know, how do all those three things get tied up together in a book that actually gets published by somebody else? And so I thought by doing the book club, I think it's only 4 weeks because it's not that big of a book, but the book club will allow us on a weekly basis to bring our questions to the table that might have to do with anything mystic related, anything gay related, anything writing of the memoir related, the shaping of our stories. So I'm just going to be there as a facilitator of the conversations that come up for us when we're immersed in this book. Because I already know that it's a great book. So I already know you're going to love it. But I think what's going to also happen, it's going to be confronting you in a way where you're going to want to say, what did you mean by that? And how about this? Where does this fit in? So the book club is just going to be a looking at the book, if that's what people have to bring to the table, or a looking at how do you know when you should write a memoir? You know, how did you get all these stories lined up like that? I don't know I don't know what my story is. So it'll be about that. But it's 4 weeks of convening in the name of the book. You're going to be reading the book, and I will, if nobody has any questions to start, I'll just pick something in the book and talk about it. On is to be on my newsletter list so you get my mailings, because if you didn't get one today, you will, it's not right. You should get one for me today, because we have to figure out how to thread together our support circles. And one good way to know you're going to get weekly support from me is to get on jan@janphillips.com mailing list. So you just go to my website, click on put me on her mailing list, and your life will be supported by me and by other voices that I bring to the table. Because this work that we're doing is very high level creative work. I mean, we're co-creating the planet here. We're co-creating civilization with other human beings, and we're an agent in the matter. We cause things to happen. San Diego looks like it looks because I'm here and I do things. Where you are, it has your signature on it somehow. It should have, because we all do things. So we're creating in the bigger scheme, but we're creating our lives day by day. And we're creating a vivid spirituality that causes us to feel that our lives are full of purpose and full of passion and connected to each other. We want to feel connected to each other. So That's what I feel is important. Is there another question out there?
There's a question in the chat from Marta asking, how can someone sign up for the book club?
Okay, I just sent the link out to it in my mailing today. So you have a Zoom link. I will be sending another Zoom link out and another reminder email, but it only goes to people who are on my list. So the only way you could get it is to get on my newsletter list. That's the trade-off, which just means you have to go to janphillips.com and sign up for my newsletter. Okay. Hey, good. There's the link. Any other questions? Look at you all. I know some of these faces. Oh, look at the two sisters sitting side by side. Say hi to me, Carla, the doggy. Unmute yourself.
This
You
is
don't
what,
have a question, the two of you? You don't have a question up there? Deborah? All right.
well, I'm puzzled by how you deal with this brother who loves Trump. Because my next door neighbor in Florida, I love her dearly, but we just start yelling at each other.
Yeah. Well, that's why I put the question out there, because I don't have the solution either.
Oh, well, gee.
I haven't figured it out. I noticed this in the last 4 years. I have hardly visited my brother. And
Well,
I used to visit him 2 or 3 times. He's only in Phoenix. But it's just not as fun anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't like there to be a topic that's off where let's just not go there. I don't like to have those constraints. So it's just easier for me not to go there, right? I was there because I had to go to Phoenix to do my TED talk. And so I stayed overnight with him, and he's an avid Jeepster. So I said, Jim, take me out Jeeping. And then I knew we'd be in the desert and we'd be looking at great cactus, and we wouldn't have an occasion to talk about politics. So we're out there, we're crazy wild in the desert. I got my drone, I'm flying it around. I'm mystified by these cactuses. And on the way home, because it was a few days before we knew if Joe Biden was president.
oh, you geez.
And so he had gone into the restaurant to order something. And when he came back to the Jeep, he said, do you know Joe Biden is the new president? I go, oh. And I wanted to jump up and down for joy, but I just go, oh, that's good. I'm glad it's been decided. And he leans into me and he goes, you know, Paula and I don't agree with one thing Joe Biden thinks. He's 3 years younger than me, but he's treating me like this little kid. And I said, I already know that, Jim. And that's as far as it went. Because we're never going to agree.
Yeah, I know.
Never going to agree.
Mhm.
So I don't know what the solution is. The world, you know, we used to, in the old days, all watched a news station that said the same things. ABC, NBC, CBS, Walter Cronkite, Brinkley, Huntley, and they said the same news. But now we live in a world where there's 2 sets of news. And so I don't know how we're going to get out of it. But I have to keep going back into myself and just say, work on what you can do. Write your books. I already have a new book I'm writing called Stop Seeking, Start Finding. Because I think, you know, people come up to me all the time and say, I'm a seeker. And I'm going, you imagine you've been playing hide and seek for 50 some years. Aren't you ever going to find that thing? So-
Linda got me a book years ago entitled, Don't Just Do Something, Sit There. And I thought, I pulled that out the other day. What a great title.
It's a great title, yeah. Don't just do something, sit there. Yeah. So it's good advice for us. Because when we sit in our place of silence and mindfulness, then we're being communicated to by mind at large, by the intelligence of the cosmos, and we're being loved up by the great love that exists everywhere, ubiquitous love. And so to me, those are the happiest moments of my day. I really like, last night I went off to my book club, today I have a plumber coming, nice conversation with the plumber. But my favorite part of the day is that first hour. And I get my coffee, I light my candles, I lie back down at my bed, and I'm just in the quiet for an hour. That's everything to me. And that's my faithfulness. Don't ever have to go to a church, although I do go to Unity Church occasionally, and I do occasionally go to a woman priest Catholic church just because I have huge longings for a communion line. And every once in a while, I'll go to benediction on YouTube. So I can hear the benediction songs in Latin and Holy God, we praise thy name. So even though from my brain intellectual part, I say don't traffic in that old patriarchal stuff anymore, but I still do too. It's like it provides something for us. Old rote prayers, I still say 2 old rote prayers, even though I have to change 2 lines, because I stand before you sinful and sorrowful. I don't say that. I say I stand before you happy and hopeful, right? Because I know my words become my life, become my experience. And so all my prayers don't include anything that's self-hurting or derogatory or humiliating. So anyway, it's 5:04. Okay. We don't know anyone who supports Trump. So, okay. It's 5:04. This hasn't been about him. This has been about us. I hope it's moved some of us, all of us, forward a little bit, deeper, inward, whatever. But my joy to be with you. Thank you for showing up.
Thank you all so much for joining us. Please check out Jan's new book, Still on Fire. Jan, how can they get the book?
Oh, you can get it from my website. The first printing, the photographs in there were a little faint and gray. So Unity Books is in the process of reprinting that, so the photos get to the proper quality. But I do have a batch. They sent me a batch of, I ordered 100 and they sent me 100. So you can either wait 2 weeks and get the more perfect printing, or when you go to my website to sign up for the newsletter, just go to my shop and click on get book and I'll send it out to you tomorrow. That's how that goes. I'll sign it to you too. I'll just sign my name, and I always send a couple extra goodies for people. So it's a bonus. It's always smart. Amazon has it now on Kindle.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Jan, so much for such an inspiring talk to help us connect to that still small voice inside us and remember our purpose and our passion for being here on this planet. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. We are just so blown away by your support over the past year. And I would love to encourage you to check out on October 27th, we have a program by Sister Christine Shank, Archaeology's Surprising Story about Early Christian Women and Men, and reclaiming the powerful role that women actually played in early church history. So please check that out. You can find that on riversedgecleveland.com. And please get Jan's book. I know it's going to be amazing. I'm excited to read it myself. So thank you all so much.
Good. And Sarah, send me the link to this recording and I'll pass it on to everybody.
I will. And I'll send it to all of you as well.
Thanks for showing up. Good to see you all, my buds.